All right, ready to dive in. We're tackling dTMS therapy today, deep transcranial magnetic stimulation for those who need a refresher. You've been looking into it. Seems like you're really interested in the potential there, so we're going to break it all down.
You know, it's interesting. dTMS, it's not like it's coming out of nowhere. It's
Yeah.
actually built on this, well, this existing technology, rTMS. You've heard of that, right?
Yeah.
Repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation.
So we're talking about like an evolution here, not a revolution. rTMS is like what, the first generation, and now we've got the newer, like sleek model with dTMS.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And the real difference is like the tech behind it. You
Yeah.
know, dTMS uses this thing, this H-coil, developed by a company called Brainsway. And what's cool about it, this H-coil, it can stimulate a way bigger area of the brain, and it goes deeper too.
Yeah.
That's where the deep comes in, you see.
So we're not just like scratching the surface here. We're talking about a deeper impact, literally. So if rTMS is like using a flashlight, dTMS is more like, what a floodlight, just illuminating more of the brain.
Exactly. And that difference, that's really what sets them apart. It's what lets dTMS do, well, potentially do some pretty incredible things. But hold on, let's not get ahead of ourselves and back up for a sec. What exactly is dTMS? You know, for anyone just tuning in.
Right, let's paint a picture here.
Okay, so imagine you're holding this powerful magnet, and you've got it positioned over specific parts of your brain, right? And picture that magnet sending these like gentle magnetic pulses, and they're stimulating those brain areas. That's dTMS, basically. And get this, it's totally non-invasive. It's kind of like getting an MRI, you know?
So we're not talking about some experimental sci-fi thing here. This is like legit therapy, right? With some serious credentials.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The FDA, they've given dTMS the green light here in the U.S. for treating, let's see, major depressive disorder, that's MDD, and also obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, in adults. And it's not just here, it's got the CE mark too. That means it meets those European Union standards, you know, for safety and health.
Okay, that's good to know, especially with you looking into this for yourself. But I'm guessing it's not like just anyone with depression or OCD is a candidate for this, right? There's got to be some specific criteria.
Oh, you're totally right. At least here in the U.S., the FDA, they've got these specific criteria, yeah. Like someone with MDD, they might have to show that antidepressants, they just haven't really worked for them during this current episode.
Yeah. So it's not always the first line of treatment, more like another tool, right? When other approaches haven't quite cut it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the FDA either. Insurance companies, they might have their own hoops to jump through. It's always smart to, you know, check your own policy just in case.
Always got to know the lay of the land, right? You've been researching this quite a bit, so maybe you've already come across this, but it seems like the U.S. is a little, how do I say this, a little more cautious with its approvals compared to other places. What's the deal with that? What are they using dTMS for in other parts of the world?
See, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
And your research is spot on. The EU, they've given dTMS the go-ahead for a whole bunch of other stuff. It goes way beyond just depression and OCD. I'm talking Alzheimer's, autism, bipolar disorder, chronic pain, even stroke rehab.
Now that's what I call expanding your horizons. It seems like every week there's something new they're studying dTMS for. Were you aware of just how diverse the applications were?
Wow, it's like dTMS is what, the Swiss Army knife of brain treatments or something?
Yeah.
But okay, let's rein it in for a second. Get back to basics here. We talked about what dTMS is, who it can maybe help. But the big question is, how does it actually work? Like, what's the magic behind it?
Well, at its heart, dTMS is all about, kind of manipulating brain activity.
Mhm.
Those magnetic pulses we were talking about, they're targeted, really precisely targeted at specific spots in the brain, areas that, they're known to be associated with certain conditions. So it's like we're giving those regions a little nudge in the right direction.
So like if someone's dealing with depression, dTMS could, target those parts of the brain that are responsible for mood? Exactly. You got it.
Yes.
And with OCD, it might be more about targeting those areas that are all about those repetitive thoughts, the compulsions, right? It's like fine-tuning those brain circuits, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Using a really precise tool to get to the root of the problem. But what's a treatment session actually like? Can you walk us through it? What can someone expect?
All right, so picture this. You're sitting there, nice and comfortable, and you're wearing this, it's kind of like a helmet, but more like a high-tech headband, really. And the treatment itself, it's actually really quick, only takes about 20 minutes.
So you could fit it into your day pretty easily. You were a bit worried about the time commitment, weren't you? That's good news. And just to double check, it's still non-invasive, right? No surgery or anything.
You're right on the money. No surgery, no implants, nothing like that. Just those magnetic pulses doing their thing. Oh, and you mentioned the headband earlier. You might feel a little tapping sensation on your head, right where that coil is. Some people, they think it's a little strange at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly.
Good to know. Okay, but let's talk results. Let's say someone goes through with dTMS. What can they realistically hope for? Is it like instant, like flipping a switch?
Well, here's where we got to be realistic, right? It's not an instant cure, unfortunately. Some people, they see some big improvements, even, complete remission, but usually it's a bit more gradual than that.
Okay, so patience is key. It's more of a, what, a commitment, not a quick fix. And on that note, how long does it usually take before someone starts to notice a difference?
It really depends. Everyone's different, but a lot of people, they'll start to see changes after, say, a few weeks of treatment, as long as they're consistent.
It's got to be that consistent effort, got to give it time to work. Which, that actually makes me think of something else you were curious about, the long game. Does this mean dTMS, like, replaces all the other treatments? Or is it more like it works with them?
That's a really important question. And while dTMS can be super effective, it's important to remember it might not completely replace those traditional treatments, like medication or therapy. For a lot of people, combining dTMS with those other approaches, that's what seems to be the most beneficial.
So it's more like a powerful tool, but it's part of a bigger strategy, not necessarily replacing everything else.
That's how I see it. And, you mentioned the long term, and that's where things get even more, well, more interesting, I think. There's this thing, it's called reinduction. Basically, imagine someone, they do dTMS, things are looking up, symptoms improve, and then down the line, those symptoms, they creep back in. Well, they can actually do another round of dTMS, try to get back to that good place.
So it's not just a one and done kind of deal. You can potentially repeat it if you need to, which honestly, I bet that's a huge relief for some people, especially with something like, depression, OCD, the fact that there's this potential for long-term management, that's going to be huge.
Absolutely. It gives people hope, options, and that's crucial when it comes to mental health, wouldn't you say? Now, I know we like to focus on the good stuff, but with any medical treatment, you have to be aware of the potential downsides, right? So let's be real. Let's talk about side effects for a minute. What's the deal with dTMS on that front?
Right, because like they say, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to, your health. So let's talk about the potential downsides. What's the deal with side effects with dTMS? What can someone expect there?
Well, the good news is dTMS is generally considered pretty safe. The chances of serious side effects, it's really low. But, and you know this, with any medical treatment, there's always a chance of some mild side effects, stuff that's usually temporary.
So nothing too scary, but good to know what we're working with here. What are we talking about specifically?
It actually can be a little different depending on, what you're treating. Like for MDD, the most common things people mention are, some pain, maybe discomfort, right where that coil is positioned. Oh, and some people get jaw pain too. Now with OCD, it's a little different. Headaches, those are more common. And some people say they feel anxious and that jaw pain pops up again too. Oh, and sometimes cold-like symptoms even. Some people have mentioned GI issues, neck pain, fatigue, that kind of thing.
Okay, so not exactly fun, but it sounds like those are all pretty manageable, especially if they don't last long. Anything else people should keep in mind?
Yeah, there have been some reports, not as common, but some other side effects have come up, like headaches, muscle twitching, back pain, anxiety, insomnia, things like that. But it's really important to say dTMS, it hasn't been linked to any permanent side effects, nothing severe.
That's definitely good to hear, especially when you're, weighing your options and everything. I feel like we've really covered a lot of ground here on dTMS. What do you think?
I think so. We've gone from the early days of brain stimulation all the way to the nitty-gritty of dTMS. Even looked ahead a bit to the future.
And you're right, we didn't really get into all the details about dTMS for addiction. It's still early days, but the research seems, well, really promising so far.
Yeah, for sure. You were asking about it earlier, and it hasn't gotten the full green light from the FDA here for that specific use for addiction, but there's some really interesting research coming out of other places. Some studies are saying it could be really helpful with cravings, even relapse rates for people dealing with alcohol use disorder.
That's alcohol addiction is notoriously difficult to treat, right? And it's not just for alcohol, is it? What about nicotine addiction?
Right. There's some really compelling research on that front too. They did this one study and it showed an 81% response rate. Can you believe that? Heavy smokers who did dTMS, and a third of them were still totally off cigarettes 6 months later.
Wow. Those are Those are some impressive numbers. Seems like DTMS could really change the game when it comes to treating addiction.
I think so too. And it's especially exciting if you think about people who are dealing with, a dual diagnosis.
Hmm.
So they're struggling with a mental health condition and addiction.
Hmm.
dTMS might be able to help with both, it's a much more holistic approach, wouldn't you say?
It's like a beacon of hope for people who've maybe tried other things and haven't had much luck?
That's it exactly. And honestly, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. This is great info to cover, don't get me wrong, but it's not medical
You're
advice.
preaching to the choir. If anyone out there is thinking about DTMS, talk to your doctor, a healthcare professional. They're the ones who can really look at your situation, your health history, and figure out if DTMS is the right move.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Everyone's different. What works for one person might not work for another. That's just the way it is.
Well said. We hope this deep dive into DTMS has given you, well, a better grasp on this whole thing. It's a really, really interesting treatment. The benefits, those potential benefits are huge. And honestly, it just seems like there's so much potential there. Remember, the more you know, the better equipped you are to make those decisions, about your health and what's right for you.